So the Denver Nuggets are your 2023 NBA Finals champions. And what better time to go back in history and rank some of the best championship teams of all time? Why not just rank all of them? So we're going back to 1980. I don't want to go much sooner than that. It's hard to find some reliable info on some of those squads, but hey, from 1980 all the way to 2023, we're going to be ranking every team that won the NBA Finals. And I'll get my bias out the way early. I don't want anyone in the comments getting too angry at me. I was born in '04. I haven't seen a lot of these teams play live. So this is very research based. It's very stats based. And, there's a lot of opinions across the way. So if I put your favorite championship squad 2-0, please let me know in the comments. And we're going to start out with my favorite team of all time, Boston Celtics. Maybe not this year specifically. It's a little early for me, but I am a big Celtics fan. So it only feels right I start out with them. It's only fair, right? So, this Celtics team, I'm not going to spend too much time on these teams lower down the board, but this is probably the worst championship team since 1980. And it's not to the fault of their squad. They went 62-20, but Larry Bird was 24. He just hadn't hit his peak yet. It was really Robert Parrish leading the way. And in the finals, Cedric Maxwell, at shooting guard, 18 points, 10 rebounds. That's incredible. So credit to the Celtics team, but they just hadn't fully hit their peak yet. We hadn't seen Larry Bird at his best. And as we'll see later in this list, those Celtics teams with Larry Bird at his best, whew, incredible. We just weren't there yet in 1981. Next up, we have the 1999 Spurs. This team went 37-13 in the regular season. Unfortunately, there was a lockout, so they had a shortened 50-game season. But the squad was coached by a younger Greg Popovich, and they had a young Tim Duncan, just an incredible pairing. And not to mention, they already had their stud David Robinson there. This is one of the most underrated front courts ever. These guys were dominant. But when you look at the rest of the team and you look at the circumstances they had, it was only a 50-game regular season. That definitely messes up their chances to be known as one of the best teams ever. So it puts them a little farther down on this list. But there's some great Spurs teams coming up. 42 is the Mavericks. If this list was about the most incredible playoff runs, Mavericks are top 5 because this is unbelievable. And I want to give all credit where it's due. Such a fun team. Shout out to all my Mavericks fans. But can you guys admit this team kind of sucked? That's definitely the most impressive part of all of this because who is on this Mavericks team besides Dirk? They went 57-25, great record. But you look at guys like Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd was horrible. He was so old. He really shouldn't have even been a starting point guard at this point. Dirk's sidekick was Sean Marion. I love the Matrix. I love Sean Marion, but that shouldn't win a championship, especially when you got to go against the big three Heat with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. That's a team we'll talk about later. That team was built to beat anybody in the world. And Dirk Nowitzki kind of took him down by himself. That's absolutely incredible. So once again, incredible run. This team was electric to watch. So fun. But if we're talking about how talented the team was, it wasn't that talented. So it's pretty far down on the list. Next up, we'll go to the Bucks. The Bucks kind of got the short end of the stick. Obviously they played in the bubble, but this squad didn't win it all in the bubble. They won it all the next year. And the season only started at Christmas time this year. They went 46-26, only played 72 games, but they were playing with no fans in attendance. It was a very strange year, and I give the Bucks a lot of credit for defying the odds because just like the bubble Lakers, who will come up later, they had a lot to go through as a team. But if we talk about how talented the squad was, not a lot compared to these other squads. You got to remember, this team is awesome, but we're talking about every team that's won a championship since 1980. And compared to some of those old guys, it's just nothing special. I don't know. Giannis cemented himself as a Bucks all-time great. Don't get me wrong, this team was awesome. They really handled business against the Suns. They beat them in 6, but they just don't have some of these key pieces that some of these other teams have. No disrespect, great squad, but you'll see later why they're so low. Coming up next is the 84 Celtics. This team went 62-20, and this is where we start seeing some prime Larry Bird. They beat Magic and Kareem at 7 in the finals, and this was a team that kind of got assembled at the start of the year. Like the Celtics have been good before this, don't get me wrong, but one of the key pieces of the squad was Dennis Johnson, and they acquired him right before the year from Phoenix. Kevin McHale wasn't at his best yet, which is why this team is a little low. This is when Kevin McHale was coming off the bench. We didn't get that Bird and McHale awesome duo that we're used to talking about, and that'll come up later in this video. McHale was still coming off the bench. So once again, this is a Celtics team that was great, but they just hadn't hit their peak yet. You'll see when they hit their peak. 39, we have the 2019 Raptors. This team was so fun, right? I love this team personally, and I'm a Celtics fan. So they went 58 and 24. And obviously, the big storyline of the squad is that they traded DeMar DeRozan, one of the best franchise players of all time, Raptors legend, to get Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard had proven that he can be that finals performer, that he's one of the best players in the league. And he came in and changed the Raptors' history right away. I mean, you look at this team, they had great contributions from Van Vliet and Lowry and Siakam. This was young Siakam when we thought he might be one of the best players in the league. It's been a minute since then, but I mean, this team was awesome. They also fired Dwayne Casey and brought in Nick Nurse kind of on a Hail Mary, and it worked out great. Championship squad. Talent wise, it's not one of the best we've ever seen, but what a fun team, man. What a fun team. Next is the 2006 Heat, another team I just love, coming in at 38. They didn't have a ton of talent. It was really just D Wade, except they did go and get Shaq. The team went 52 and 30, and Shaq was the missing piece, clearly. They took a big risk in going out and trading for him, acquiring him. And this isn't the early 2000s Shaq, the late 90s Shaq. This was an old Shaq who people had said he may have lost a step. People thought the Heat were crazy for investing so much into getting him, but Shaq and D Wade had amazing chemistry, and it led them to the promised land. This season had a lot of turbulence for the Heat. Stan Van Gundy quit on the team very early in the season. He said he wanted to spend more time with his family, and the legend Pat Riley stepped in and led them all the way. So moving on, we have the 2005 Spurs just from the year before. This team went 59 and 23 with Duncan, Manu, Parker, and they beat a tough Pistons team that had just won it all in 2004. I mean, they had to take on an amazing Pistons team who was going for the repeat. Tim Duncan this year added another Finals MVP to his resume. And, you see the guy on the cover, Manu Ginobili. This is the year we really saw him step up. He wasn't just that sixth man. He was a starter. He deserved minutes, and he was incredible in those minutes. Next up is the first team I researched, the 1980 Lakers. It's the oldest team we're going to see on the board. I'm sorry for the picture quality. Photos weren't great back then. But to get on a more serious note and talk about this amazing squad, they went 60 and 22, and this was rookie Magic Johnson, high draft pick out of Michigan State, teaming up with, Kareem, possibly at his best. This is early Lakers Kareem, and they had a lot of a lot of problems with the squad too, because their head coach, Jack McKinney, who was a really good coach, he had to resign after 14 games into the season when he had an almost fatal bike accident. And due to that, they had to hire the interim coach, Paul Westhead, who led them all the way. Kareem was amazing this year. Magic was only a rookie, but Kareem got hurt in the finals, and Magic had to step in as a point guard and play center. How did he do? Only 42 points and 15 rebounds. What an amazing squad. This isn't even Magic Johnson at his best. I think a lot of my themes with these earlier teams is that, don't get me wrong, they're awesome, but the teams lower down on this list, a lot of them just hadn't hit their peak yet. And when Magic was at his best, the Lakers were much better than this. But what an amazing start to the run, winning the finals and the finals MVP as a rookie. I mean, that's why Magic Johnson's one of the greatest ever, man. Really. Next up, we're at the 2007 Spurs. They went 58 and 24. Once again, Duncan, Parker, Manu, one of the best trios in NBA history. And a young LeBron Cavs team had no chance. LeBron didn't have a lot of help over there. This Spurs team was just overpowering them. I mean, Tony Parker particularly stepped up huge. I love Tim Duncan. He's maybe the most underrated players ever. He's an all-time, he's like top 10, top 5. He really is that good. But he didn't play great this finals. It was really Tony Parker, and you can see him holding that finals MVP trophy. He walked out with that because he was incredible. The young Cavs had no response at guard for him. LeBron James couldn't do it himself, and they were too good. 2007 Spurs team was really good. Next up is the 88 Lakers. This team went 62 and 20, and they were led by Magic, Scott, Worthy, and they had an older Kareem. Kareem wasn't the stud on this team. At this point, Magic Johnson had already taken over, and they beat the Bad Boys Pistons in 7. I'll talk about those Bad Boys Pistons later, but they were really tough, especially when you look back on them. I mean, it was an incredible run that was highlighted by not Magic Johnson. It was actually highlighted by James Worthy. They were going into game 7, and they needed a performance from somebody on the squad. Somebody had to step up and knock off this bad boys Pistons team. And it wasn't Magic, it was James Worthy. James Worthy dropped 36, 16, and 10 in the game 7 to bring it back to LA. If that's not incredible, I don't know what is. But just if we're talking talent wise on the team, Magic, Worthy, Scott, even Kareem in his older years, his stats weren't very good, but you can't deny Kareem is still one of the best ever. So having a guy like that still starting at your center spot, it's going to help your team quite a bit. Next up is those '04 Pistons. A Pistons team that went 54 and 28. Do you guys remember this starting lineup? And this is the year I was born. Believe me, I had to do some, this isn't a team I got to watch vividly, but Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, Rasheed Wallace, Ben Wallace. What a starting five. Like, oh my goodness. And this team did not have a star player. These guys had amazing defense, probably the best defensive team of all time, amazing chemistry. They all came ready to play, and they didn't need a star to be one of the best teams ever because everybody on that team contributed. If you played minutes on this Pistons team in '04, you were awesome. Everybody on this team stuck together, great team chemistry, and I got to give them credit where it's due. I really wish I could have put them higher because this might be one of the most underrated finals championship teams ever. These guys were awesome. Going on to the 2012 Heat, this Heat team should have been way more awesome. This team had all the talent in the world, but they kind of got screwed because this is the first year that the big three really got to play with each other. And they only went 46 and 20 because of another CBA lockout. The cards were kind of out of their favor there, so I couldn't put them that high. But they hadn't hit their peak yet either as a team. They were still finding their footing. And, they took on OKC team in the finals with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, James Harden. Awesome team, but the Heat didn't really have to be at their best to beat a team like that. They were just too young. The Thunder were just too young to handle themselves. And if the Heat got a full season this year, this might be a team we're talking top 10, but I can't rank them as one of the most dominant teams ever if we didn't even get to see a full year from them. Next up is the 2022 Warriors. Just recently won. They were your reigning finals champs until last night as I'm recording this when the Nuggets handled business. But this team was 53 and 29, and these guys don't have the same story as these historic Warriors teams that, won a bajillion games every other year. This Warriors team had to struggle. The year before in 2020, 2021, Klay Thompson tore his ACL. He was out for the year. He didn't play on this team until mid-January. The Warriors had to kind of find their footing without, one of their star players. Draymond Green, I see him in the image right here. I like Draymond a lot, but this is when he started to fall off. He wasn't the same Draymond as we knew from these championship teams, and the Warriors still figured it out. They went on a really bad losing streak right before the playoffs and fell to the 3rd seed, but once they got to the playoffs, it was wraps from there. They just had too much experience. Nobody could match up with them, and once they made it to the finals against a young Celtics team, they broke my heart, but they were just too good for that Celtics team. They were too experienced. They looked like they had been there before. And like every other Warriors team up this list, they were just unbelievable at home. You couldn't beat the Warriors and Oracle from like 2015 forward. It was ridiculous. But let's kick it to 2020, and we get to talk about the bubble Lakers. I'm sure all the Lakers fans were waiting to see where this team would be, but I think 30 is very respectable, and I'm going to tell you why. They went 52 and 19, shortened season. They got 10 less games than they were supposed to, but they fought through insane circumstances. You see the guys right here, LeBron and AD, but this was AD at his best. Can I just say I think this is the best AD's ever played, including this year? I mean, he went out there and dropped 26 and 9 every night, and we know what LeBron does in the playoffs. It was no surprise how this team handled business in the bubble. I think a lot of people want to say this championship didn't count and they discredit it, but every team had to go through a similar thing. And this is coming from me. I'm not a Lakers fan, but I will say every team had to fight through these circumstances with, the C word virus. I don't know if we're allowed to say it on YouTube, but this Lakers team came out on top, and it was an incredible team. They would be higher, but if we're talking about talent wise, it was really just LeBron and AD. These guys were at their best, don't get me wrong, but who else on that team was really being a contributor? They had a lot of old role players that, stepped up when it mattered, but it was the LeBron and AD show, to no surprise of anyone. Next up is another all-time great LeBron team. I'm sorry if they're a little low for you guys, but the 2016 Cavs. They went 57-25, and it's really about the story. I mean, do I even need to tell you what happened here? The 73-9 Warriors, a team that would have been number one on this list easily. They go up 3-1, and LeBron and the Cavs just will it all the way back. Oh, shaking over here. But even more than that, everyone's going to talk about that 3-1 run. But let's not forget, this Cavs team fired their coach halfway through the season for almost no reason. The team was pretty good, but they didn't think they could get it done with David Blatt. LeBron didn't like him. So they got him on the way out and brought in Ty Lue. And man, I've never been a LeBron fan, but I miss these days of LeBron. And this was probably the best individual season from him ever. And he propelled a team that really wasn't that good all the way. So again, like I talk about with the Dirk Mavericks, if this was the best playoff runs ever, you guys already know I'm putting this number one. But this is about how good the team is. And LeBron made this team that wasn't really all that one of the most historic teams ever. So I got to give LeBron his flowers for that one. That's incredible. Let's talk about the 2009 Lakers, a team I love to talk about. Kobe's my guy. And they went 65-17. Whew. This is Kobe and Pau Gasol. This isn't the Kobe and Shaq days, but Phil Jackson led this team and they just dominated. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. 65-17 is incredible. And once they got to the finals, they had a young Dwight Howard and Orlando, and they just knocked them out in 5. It was simple. I'm surprised Dwight even got a game on him, but this was a fun squad. We're going to talk about more Kobe and Pau teams later. I guess technically this is the worst of them, but they were still dominant. So what's that got to tell you about the other Kobe teams? I mean, you guys my guy up a little bit here, but let's talk about the 1990 Pistons to switch the topic. They went 59-23, and this is when IT and the squad got their second straight ring in these bad boys Pistons era. Not quite as good as the first one, but the second one still awesome, top 25-ish. And their Eastern Conference Final Series against MJ was really, what made this team so amazing. They went to this incredibly difficult series against MJ and the Bulls, back against the wall, but they came out on top and they knocked off Drexler's Blazers in 5 in the finals. I mean, this Pistons team, they've had better years than this one. I'll get more into it when we get to talk about the really bad boys Pistons, but got to give them credit where it's due. You beat MJ in the playoffs. I mean, that's a big step. And then finals were no problem for them. It was really MJ or the Pistons this year, and the Pistons came out on top. You see the guy Rodman, who would later join MJ, but he was one of the main reasons why they were able to knock him off in 1990. Kicking into 1994, this team went 58-24, and Hakeem got himself a ring in MJ's absence. Shout out to Olajuwon because he is one of the best players ever. He gets so disrespected by kids my age who haven't seen him play. But if you do the research, you crunch the numbers, and you just watch some of his highlights, man, you don't even got to watch his game footage. Just watch a couple of his highlights, read the stats, read what the guys that are older than us and smarter than us have to talk about, and you'll know he was that dude. He really was. I mean, this finals was incredible too. They had probably the best 1v1 finals matchup of all time, where we got Hakeem versus Patrick Ewing. And in 7, Hakeem got the better of him. This Rockets team was really good. I don't think we should disrespect this squad. Just because MJ wasn't in the league doesn't mean this Rockets team hadn't built up an incredible foundation, because even if they were taking on MJ and the Bulls in the finals, this Rockets team might have beat them anyways. I might sound crazy to say that, but let's talk about the 2003 Spurs instead. Here we are in the top 25, by the way, and this team went 16-22. This was Duncan and Parker at their best. This was the very tail end of David Robinson's career, and this is the point in the Spurs franchise history where they were finally ready to move on from Duncan and Robinson. Shout out Duncan Robinson, but Duncan and Robinson, because Robinson was on the way out. He was old. He was ready to retire. This is when guys like Tony Parker had to step up and prove that he could help Tim Duncan win many more rings to come. And this was pre-Manu Ginobili. I mean, this was right before Manu joined the squad, or, was a big contributor on the squad. So it was an incredible team. I mean, David Robinson, it kind of reminds me of the Kareem and Magic thing earlier. Obviously, Magic and Tim Duncan are nowhere near close to the same type of player, but a stud center that had brought your team to so much success, you still win them a ring on the way out. And I love seeing that. So respect to the Spurs team. Talk about the 1991 Bulls. This team went 61-21, and this was Michael Jordan's first ring on the Bulls. We're going to be talking about him a lot. If you are a Lakers fan or a Michael Jordan fan, you are going to love the end of this episode. I'm telling you that. But I mean, he had Pippen, he had Grant. This is one of the early Bulls teams. And to cap off a dominant regular season, they took out Magic Johnson's Lakers in 5. You see MJ versus Magic. You expect that to be a series that goes to 7, goes all the way the distance, but they made it happen in 5. Credit to them. Talk about the 2014 Spurs. You see my man Kawhi with Bill Russell. Rest in peace, the legend. This team went 62-20. This is probably the best Spurs team we ever got to see. I'm not going to lie to you, because not only did they have Tim Duncan, they had Tony Parker, they had Monty Ginobili. Guys I've been talking about all episode. Once they got to the finals, they were led by that dude Kawhi. And people will joke about Deshaun Stevenson. I've even heard Damari Carroll, like these classic LeBron stoppers. Kawhi Leonard actually was the LeBron stopper. We remember that classic clip of LeBron at the free throw line. He sees Kawhi checking in and he knows it's wraps. That's really the story of this whole team. I mean, this Spurs team was unbelievable. If the Miami Heat didn't exist this year, this Spurs team could have won 70 games. I'm telling you, they were so dominant. But in the back of their mind, they did have to worry about that big 3 team, and they met them in the finals, beat them in 5. What an incredible showing from the Spurs here. And if you don't think it's the best, they're still my favorite Spurs team that ever went the distance. Let's talk about this year's Nuggets, man. Congratulations to Denver once again. They went 53-29 this season, and Jokic and Murray brought it back to Denver. I say back, they brought it to Denver for the first time. First finals appearance in Denver Nuggets history, and their first championship in the same year. That man Jokic right there, coming off 2 straight MVPs, was feeling some disrespect, had to show out in the playoffs. It was incredible. I mean, feels like he's getting a triple-double every game, but let's not forget about Murray. Murray is uber talented. Talk to me in the comments. Is he in your top 5 point guards in the league right now? I know that sounds crazy, but we just watched the same we just watched the same games, and he sure was looking like it. So this team was very talented. Obviously, their role guys were awesome. Bruce Brown, whole reason they won Game 5. Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon. We're going to have the podcast coming out this Thursday, and we'll get to talk more about this team in particular, so I won't go on too long. But this team already a top 25 most talented finals team ever. Incredible. Let's talk about the 1985 Lakers next. They went 62-20. Magic and Kareem. What else do I got to say? Before this year, they made a really smart decision and grabbed Clippers and Buffalo Braves legend Bob McAdoo and brought him off the bench. You see the guy James Worthy there too. I mean, I'm just listing names of these all-time legends that were all on this squad, and it took those guys to go out and beat Larry Bird in 85. Larry Bird in 85 was, as my guy Eric would say, a bad mamma jamma. He was tough in 85, but this Lakers team assembled a squad that, just matched up incredibly with them. Larry was no match, and they beat the Celtics in 6. It's a really good squad. Let's talk top 20, and let's talk 2018 with the 58-24 Warriors. KD and Curry made it past Cleveland for the 4th straight matchup. This is the very tail end of those awesome Cavaliers and Warriors, matchups that, remind me of my childhood. Now, I know that makes me sound young to a lot of y'all, but that was my childhood, man. And the only reason this team is lower than a lot of those other teams is because they didn't have the regular season success, and that's because Curry was hurt. The team basically coasted in the regular season, waited for Curry to come back, and when he was back, it was wraps. So moving on to 19, let's talk about the 1998 Bulls. This is 62-20 Bulls, and this is the 3rd straight ring of the three-peat Bulls. MJ, Pippen, Rodman, they knocked off Utah in 6. And let's talk about Tony Kukoc. He didn't really fit in with that team at first. They didn't like him over there, but he was a huge reason why this Bulls team was able to wrap it up in 1998. And this year was a huge milestone in MJ's career and in Coach Phil Jackson's career. MJ had moved up to the 3rd all-time leading scorer off this year. Incredible. But what might be even more incredible is that Phil Jackson became the fastest coach to win 500 games in NBA history. These Bulls teams were absolutely dominant. They ran the league for a while, but we got to talk about these other Bulls teams later. This was just the 3rd team of the three-peat. Next up is the 2010 Lakers. This team went 57-25. And before the season, Kobe, Kobe and Pau recruited the guy Meta World Peace on the squad. They said, we got to get this guy. We got to get some defense on the team. We have to jump over the hill. We have to knock out the Celtics team. We got to get revenge. And they did it. Meta World Peace was ultimately the reason why they could knock out the Celtics in 7. In game 7, 25 points, 6 steals. Meta World Peace was dominating, and he proves that there was a reason they went out and got him. So despite all of his antics and him might being a little bit of a crazy guy, we know the malice at the palace, he was the reason that the Lakers could jump that Celtics team in 2010. And adding that extra talent boosts the Lakers even higher. Next up, let's talk about my '08 Celtics. They were 66-16, dominant regular season. I would love to put them higher just because of how great that regular season was, but they struggled through the playoffs. I mean, they had just acquired KG from the Timberwolves and Ray Allen from the Supersonics, so they had a lot of moving pieces there, but they kind of struggled through the playoffs. You know, they had a fun run, but a scary one at that. But once they got to the finals, they handled their business. They knocked off the Lakers in 6 in an awesome finals. That man, Kevin Garnett, right there was the difference maker. And Paul Pierce, after all of his time with the Celtics, finally got himself a ring. It was awesome to see. A lot of talent there, too, with Allen, Rondo. Didn't have a great center by any means. I know Brandon Bass was getting some minutes. Big Baby Davis. God, I hate those guys. But this was a talented Celtics squad. 16, let's talk about the 1993 Bulls. He's an all-time classic team, right? They went 57-25. Not the most dominant regular season from Michael Jordan terms. And this was their 3rd ring on the original Bulls three-peat. I mean, how many guys can we talk about having 2 individual three-peats? Shout out Mike. But this was the OG three-peat, the 3rd one. And they just cruised for the Eastern Conference in general. Semifinals, finals, all that, quarterfinals. They just knocked teams out easily. And when they got to the finals and they matched up against Charles Barkley, I mean, this is the reason Chuck never got his ring, because he had to go against this squad. And this might not be the peak Bulls, but this is not a Bulls team you ever want to play. So this is a very talented squad. Shout out to Horace Grant, got him on the cover too. Really underrated player. I don't think we talk about him enough when we talk about the reason why the Bulls were so awesome. We're in the top 15, and we're talking about the 87 Lakers that went 67-15. This was probably the best Magic Johnson we ever saw. But Kareem was really late in his career, even at this point, and he wasn't as dominant as before. As we see, he's not even in this picture. We got Michael Thompson, Magic, Worthy, Cooper, Rambis. I mean, these were the guys that really led the team, while Kareem kind of took a back seat. He was more of a mentor. He was a leader, and sometimes that's all you need, especially on these amazing championship squads. And they beat the Celtics in 6. They kind of just bull rushed them when they got to the finals. There's a lot of Lakers in this stretch. So if you're a Lakers fan, get ready to see me talk about your team over and over again. But they were no laughing matter. They knocked out a Celtics team that people had favored that year, based on what I saw. I don't know if you personally had them favored if you were watching this squad. But yeah, it was a really talented Lakers team. Let's talk about another really talented Lakers team, the 58-24 2002 Los Angeles Lakers, with that man Kobe getting his 3rd. This was the three-peat, but tensions between Kobe and Shaq were at an all-time high. They put them aside for the playoffs. They swept the Nets in 4 in the finals, but we knew after this year, shit hit the fan. This was the last we were going to see of them, but doesn't change the fact that they were amazing, they were dominant, and they made it happen this year. At 13, let's talk about the 1995 Houston Rockets. Got to talk about, this is the most wild team on this whole list to win it. And this is the lowest seed to ever win a championship. You know, Miami couldn't get it down as the 8th seed this year, but this was a 6th seed. And if you know my criteria for this list, the first thing you're going to say is, Colin, why the hell do you have a 6th seed this high? I thought this was about the best teams, and it is about the best teams, but this Rockets team was so much better than their seed will let you think. And I'm going to tell you why. These two right on the cover. This is Hakeem Olajuwon. This is amazing. This is like MVP level Hakeem with Clyde Drexler. They made a move. They got Drexler on the squad, and they started off slow. This is the reason that they fell to the 6th seed. They were catching their footing for a lot of the regular season, but when they got to the playoffs, no one was stopping them. they struggled through the West. They had to play a lot of really good teams. And when they got to the finals, Penny and Shaq, boom, 4 games. Not even a contest. So even though their regular season record is probably the lowest out of anyone on this list, and they were the lowest seed out of anyone on this list, I'm going to tell you, this team was really good. They were top 15 good. And their performance against the Magic should tell you all you need to know about that. But what an amazing pairing. I wish we got to see them for longer. I mean, they would be in a lot more history books. Let's talk about the 82 Lakers, 57-25. And Kareem and a young Magic, they didn't lose a game in the Western Conference playoffs at all. They were just running through it. But I'm checking my notes here. I want to make sure I have this right. But to my knowledge, Magic kind of put himself in a situation where you got to pick me or him. He was not a fan of the head coach, Paul Westhead, the interim that had taken the full coaching job. And he said, hey, you either got to trade me or find a new coach. And the Lakers, they made the right decision. They got a new coach. And who was that new coach? Pat Riley. This is the intro of Pat Riley, one of the best coaches of all time. And this was Magic Johnson winning his second finals MVP in 3 years. I guarantee you, people in the early 80s were talking about how this guy is already the GOAT. Because if you win 2 finals MVPs in 3 years, one of them being your rookie year, man, if that happens now, I would love to see what Twitter says about that guy. But Magic Johnson, this was a really good season for him. Another Lakers team. I promise you, this isn't just the Lakers. We'll get out of it soon, but these Lakers teams love to win the finals. And let's talk about 2001, 56-26. This is possibly Shaq and Kobe at their very, very best. And this duo only lost 1 playoff game the whole playoffs. I want to say that again. They lost 1 game in the whole playoffs. Nobody was touching them. And the team that took off that game, AI's Sixers. Probably the worst team they played against. And I know that's wild to say because they were in the finals, but shout out to AI. He led that team of a bunch of bums to the finals. Dikembe was like 40. Eric Snow, what are we talking about? If that team had won the finals, they're in dead last. Don't get me wrong. Shout out to AI, man. But he was the only guy that could even knock a game off this Lakers team. They were dominant. I would have loved to put them top 10, but 56-26 in the regular season, it's not amazing. I do have to take that into account for a little bit. Regular season doesn't matter once you get to the finals, but as we look back at all these all-time great teams, you kind of have to dominate in the regular season to be super high up on the list, or you have to be that Houston Rockets team I was just talking about. Top 10 is the 2000 Lakers. More Lakers. They're all over this page. But they went 67-15. In my opinion, it's the best Lakers team to ever win a chip ever. I mean, just look at the chemistry between these guys. This was before the falling out. This is when they had love for each other. This is when Kobe was Shaq's little brother. I mean, this was probably the most amazing and just like eye-catching Lakers team ever. And there was no ego. They're just playing at the highest level. And they kept Reggie Miller from getting a ring in 6. It knocked out that Pacers team easy. 67 wins in the regular season. That Lakers team was hard to touch. I'm not going to lie. But number 9 is the 92 Bulls, another team that went 67-15. If you want to look back when you watch this video, think about all these teams towards the top that went 67-15. If you win 67 games, I think it's just a sign you're going to win the finals. But I mean, MJ and Pippen, Phil Jackson, they were unstoppable at times. The only time that this team did struggle, and maybe why they're a little lower than they could have been, is those Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, that Knicks team was really giving them problems, but what happens when someone gives the Bulls problems? MJ goes crazy. MJ dropped 42 in Game 7, propelled themselves over a Knicks team that really could have won it all that year. I feel bad for Knicks fans because that was about the best chance you were going to get. But once they beat the Knicks, they struggled. They went in, no problem, beat the Trailblazers in 6, but that bumped them down the list a little bit. If they could have handled business a little earlier against the Knicks, maybe this is one of the best teams ever. No hate, though. Still top 10. Absolutely insane. Talk about insane. Talk about the 2015 Warriors. This is my favorite Warriors team ever, for sure. This is pre-KD, also 67-15. And this featured prime Steph, Clay, and Dre. That trio was wild. This is the Splash Brothers. This is the lineup of death. Small ball. The Warriors moved on from Mark Jackson, who was seen as a pretty good coach, and brought in Steve Kerr so he could have these wild systems, and they worked perfectly. Steve Kerr, He implemented a little bit of those triangle Bulls teams that, he learned from the best, he learned from Phil, but he made it his own squad, and they were incredible, man. They were so good. I'm a young guy. This is one of the first teams I really got to watch and, appreciate as one of the best teams ever. And this is the peak of the Splash Brothers. I'll say it again. This is when they were at their best. And LeBron's Cavs were just no match. We saw the Warriors and Cavs finals over and over again. This was one of the years where the Warriors were just too good. Too good. Let's talk about the 83 76ers. I'm going to give this one a minute to breathe because this is the most underrated NBA Finals team ever. When I look at some of these lists, this team is hanging around in the 30s, the 20s. Are you kidding me? 1983, Moses Malone went in free agency. You see him right on the screen with Rudy Tomjanovich and joined Dr. J. Dr. J, one of the best players of all time. So is Moses Malone. So underrated. They joined forces again, 65 and 17. These teams love to win 65 games. And they were incredible. They were incredible. I'm telling you. You talk about Magic and Kareem as one of the best duos ever. I respect it. I agree. They swept them in the finals. You see me get all riled up, but why does nobody talk about this team? Absolutely dominant regular season, and they make their way to the finals and sweep Magic and Kareem in an era where Magic and Kareem are still both pretty good. I mean, Magic's at his best. I'm just at a loss for words. This team should be recognized as one of the best finals teams ever. And if ESPN and Yahoo and whoever the hell else won't do it, I'll do it because this team is absolutely just, oh my God. I wish I could put them top 5, but I can't because I go to number 6 and I have the 2013 Heat. This is the big 3. We talked about a little bit earlier, the lockout season, big 3, and how they didn't reach their potential. This team got to reach their potential. 66 and 16. What are we talking about? LeBron was the MVP of the whole league. This team went on a 27-game win streak. That was record-breaking at the time. And we'll talk about a team that broke that record later. Like, this is a no-joke team. In the offseason, they knew they had to add something a little special. They picked up Ray Allen. They picked up Rashard Lewis, guys that were huge in their playoff performances. Absolutely huge. Do I have to mention the Ray Allen thing? Game 6, Heat fans are leaving the arena. It's over, except it's not. Rebound bot, kick out to Allen, bang. It's a 3. Shout out Mike Breen. Best call ever. But, as someone that wants to be a sports broadcaster, that call lives in history. But, the point is, Ray Allen, as he's not even in this image. He wasn't even one of the guys that was supposed to be this big 3 team, but they went out in free agency, got guys that could perform in the clutch, and those guys performed. This Heat team was awesome. They had talent everywhere on the roster. They were well coached. They check all the boxes. They have everything you could possibly ask for. Let's talk about 5. These 1997 Bulls. This might be one of the most underrated Bulls teams ever. They're not the first team you think of when you think of the best Bulls squads, but they were 69 and 13. And this was coming off their 72-win season just the year before, and they had to run it back. Jordan was trying to cement himself as the GOAT. They needed this, and Jordan led the league in scoring. Rodman led the league in rebounding. If that doesn't tell me there's talent, I don't know what does. Oh, wait, Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen does it all, too. He's the reason that this team even could stay afloat. Shout out to Mike, GOAT level stuff, but without Pippen, this team doesn't do it. MJ hit the shot that cemented his legacy, game 6 against the Bulls or against the Jazz. He basically is the Bulls. The Bulls are Michael Jordan at this point, but he hits the shot over the Jazz, top 5. Again, wish I could put him higher, but I don't wish I could put them over the 89 Pistons. The 89 Pistons are so good. They will live in history. They went 63 and 19, and we talk about the bad boys Pistons. This is the baddest the boys ever were. Don't take that the wrong way. But, let's just talk about the starting 5. IT, Dumars, Aguirre, Mahorn, Lambier. You're probably looking at me like, oh, yeah, that's pretty solid, man. They had Rodman off the bench. They had Vinnie Johnson off the bench. They had 7 dudes that are like borderline some of the better players from that time, all on the same squad. And they, in the playoffs, they ran through MJ's Bulls and Magic's Lakers. They had to beat everyone. They did not get any freebies. They didn't have to play any easy squads. They had to play the best of the best. And this was the toughest basketball's ever been. I hate when the old heads come talking to me, oh, basketball's not tough anymore. It's not like the old days. Well, this is the old days they're talking about. And I will say there's never been anyone tougher than this. So what a fun Pistons team, man. It was a pleasure to go back and watch them because I wasn't informed on how good this team really was. And this team is easily top five. I hate the disrespect. Now that I know, now that I'm tapped in and I've done the research, can't put this team any lower than five, if you're asking me. But we're in the top three. And what a better way to start the top three. There wouldn't be a better way because I get to talk about the Celtics. And I love talking about the Celtics. Those are my guys. But this is way before my time. This is the 86 Celtics, a team that went 67-15. A lot of teams like to do that. They invested everything into building a squad around Larry Bird. I mean, the Celtics had figured out that Larry Bird was going to be their guy for the future, and they were willing to do whatever it took. You know, they had already got Dennis Johnson, but they traded their former Finals MVP Cedric Maxwell for Bill Walton just to come off the bench. They were willing to start Danny Ainge, who had shown that he was a great shooter in an age where shooting had just recently become way more important. They decided to, you know, kind of space the floor a little bit. It's the mid 80s. Nobody was spacing the floor that well, but they were doing it better than anyone else, especially when you had a great shooter like Larry Bird. So they got Bill Walton, who had struggled with injuries. They got him off the bench. He was incredible for him. He was super important. And a story that I found in research that I'd love to share with you guys about this team, you know, it's the top three. I'll take my time a little bit. A story I love is that this team was awesome going into January. They knew they had what it took to win the finals, but they knew they needed to take another level. They needed to tap in and they needed to be locked in. They needed to be ready. What did they do? This is the mid 80s. Remember, they vouched that nobody on their team would drink again until they won an NBA finals. This is the mid 80s. There's guys that wouldn't do that now. Shout out to LeBron. If you told LeBron he wasn't allowed to have a glass of wine all year, I don't think it would go well. The Celtics team in the mid 80s, when people were doing coke before the games, they were all locked in. They decided they were going to play it the right way, and they were incredible. And I'm sure the celebration after the championship was something to behold. I can't imagine they didn't go crazy that night. But, I mean, just such a talented roster with Johnson, Ainge, Bird. This was prime McHale. Parrish was still playing awesome. Walton off the bench. I mean, wow. This team, if it weren't for these top two teams, I would love to put this team number one, but can't deny the top two. And I think you already know where I'm going. Do I click the button? Are you guys ready to see who's number two? Number two is the 2017 Warriors. They won 67-15. The year before they had gone 73-9, but they couldn't win the ring. You know, most teams would go 73-9, break the record, and just say, hey, let's run it back. No, Warriors said, let's go get Kevin Durant, top 5 player in the league. One of the best players of all time, says, hey, I'm going to join a team that just won 73 games, and we're going to go all the way. We talk about super teams. I've talked about teams that I would call super teams. I'd call that Pistons team from earlier super team. And they don't even come close to this. I can't even describe how much better this team is than every other team I've just said. My top two is the easiest top two I've ever had to pick in my entire life. This team washes any other team I've talked about because they have Curry, Clay, KD, Draymond. Oh my God. You can't even describe this squad. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, they were basically on cruise control the whole year because they knew they were making the finals. And on cruise control with like no gas in the tank, 65 games, 67 games, 67 wins. I can't even fathom it. And I know it sounds like, you know, I might be riding a little bit. I might be going too hard, but we're talking about the best teams ever, and this is easily one of them. They beat LeBron's Cavs, a really good LeBron Cavs team, a team I actually thought was a little bit underrated, and they beat them in 5. Simple. This Warriors team was incredible. I love to talk about them. This was a fun era of basketball. This is when it was very trendy to be a Warriors fan. This is when bandwagons and cupcakes were popular terms in NBA lingo, but we're about to kick it over to number one. I won't hold the suspense any longer. It's the 96 Bulls. I mean, this shouldn't surprise anyone here. If that 73-9 Warriors team could have figured it out, maybe it's a different story, but this Bulls team went 72-10. It's the best regular season from a championship team ever That gives them a lot of bonus points. Not to mention, they are much more than that 72 win record. I mean, it's accumulation of everything they did. The year before, they brought in Dennis Rodman from their rival Pistons, and where the Pistons were using him off the bench, the Bulls said, hey, this guy can be our starting power forward. He is incredible, and they saw something in him that a lot of other teams didn't see. They looked past his ego, his weird antics, all the off the court stuff that is very problematic from him. They didn't care. They just wanted the basketball player, and that basketball player was incredible. So I got to give all credit to them. What a playoff run too. I mean, if we're talking about, if you guys think I'm not crediting these amazing runs enough, this team had one. They beat Patrick Ewing, they beat Shaq and Penny. They beat the Gary Payton and Sean Kemp Supersonics. They had to beat everyone this year. They were another team that didn't get any freebies. They had to play the toughest guys in the league, and they handled business. I mean, tell me what you want from the most, the best championship team ever, and the Bulls have it. They had the best regular season record. They had some of the most, incredible playoff success. They had the most talent, the best coaching. They had everything you could possibly want. So with that being said, we just broke down every NBA champion from 1980 and ranked them. If your favorite team is too low, please let me know in the comments. If I put a team too high, let me know. And hey, we just finished up the 2023 NBA Finals. If you want to be the guy that predicts who wins it next year, tell me who you got. Anyways, I appreciate the love on the channel. We've been doing really good lately. Shout out to Banning. He's been putting a lot of work in, but we're only moving on to bigger and better things. Let me know if you have any video suggestions or you want to have a friendly discourse in the comments. If you just want to call me stupid too, I'll appreciate that as well. I love you guys. Have a great day. Thank you.